Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end. And let's get started. For Izuku Midoriya, just getting through the day smoothly was a chore. He was just your average 14-year-old boy. Well, except for the fact that he was quirkless in a world full of quirks. It made him a constant target for bullying by his peers. It wasn't anything he wasn't used to, though. It really just gave him more reason to prove them wrong one day. But for now, he'd sit quietly at the back of the class, take notes, and Izuku Midoriya, please report to the front office. The intercom buzzed to life, and the class momentarily stopped. Everyone gave him an odd look. The young quirkless boy was never called out, especially not over the intercom like that. He slowly stood up and made his way to the door. He gave a quick scan of the class and saw that even his once childhood friend, now main bully, Katsuki Bakugo, had a perplexed look on his face briefly. He opened the door and closed it behind him, and almost immediately, the teacher continued the lesson he was teaching. As he walked to the office, he thought about what could have possibly happened. I don't remember doing anything wrong. What if something terrible happened? Is my mom okay? What Abu? Izuku, sweetie. He was jolted from his thoughts, and he blinked slowly. His mom was sitting there in the office, as well as a tall woman with blue hair and a short, stocky blonde man, both of which were in very fancy attire. Izuku gave his mother a questioning glance, and he noticed that the lights were flickering. He looked over and saw a blonde girl his age flicking the light switch on and off. Thank you, King and Queen. We'll take good care of her here. The two fancy people bid them farewell and left, leaving Izuku still speechless and in the same place. Ayawabiyu. Suddenly, the girl was upon him. Hello, I'm Star Butterfly. What's your name? He stumbled back and stuttered out an answer. Izuku Midoriya. He was blushing like mad, the blonde girl, Star, staring at him with big blue eyes and a huge smile on her face. His mother gave him a warm smile. Why don't you show her around a little bit, Izuku? I have some things to fill out still, and it may take a little while. Izuku nodded, still at a loss for words. Star was bouncing up and down, happily waving the thing she had in her hands. They walked out the principal's office, and Izuku walked the energetic girl around, showing her the different areas of the school. He was careful to avoid certain places where he would know he would have trouble with Kachan. Star looked around, with literal stars in her irises. Suddenly, she pointed. I thought you didn't have magic on Earth. He looked at her, confused, until a loud yell broke him out of his stupor. DKU. He spun around and narrowly avoided a hand and a few explosions from Katsuki. He glared hard at the boy. The hell are you doing, Deku? Why would anyone want to hang out with you? Oh, let me guess. We have another quirkless woman? Izuku trembled in fear, as per normal. Meanwhile, Star had a very confused look on her face. Quirk? Is that what you call magic here? Katsuki gave her a dumbfounded expression. You stupid or something? Who the hell doesn't know what a quirk is? He held his hand out and made a few explosions. He watched them fondly. That's a quirk. Star made an O with her mouth and whipped out her wand. She grinned. I could do that. She held in the air and yelled. Mega Narwhal Blast. The wand glowed, and it shot out several large fish that Izuku recognized as narwhals. Katsuki sat on the ground, dumbfounded, with a huge fish on top of him. He slapped his hand to it and detonated, the fish exploding into a puff of smoke. He rose to his feet and flexed his hands, small explosions rolling off of them. He glared at the blonde girl. I'll kill you, you worthless. Izuku hadn't heard Katsuki that livid since he told him that he was quirkless. Star looked at him sheepishly. Sorry about that. Katsuki's eyes burned with anger, and he took a step forward, ready to blow these little ones' heads off. He caught the sight of one of teachers in his gaze. He cursed. While they usually turned a blind eye to him beating Deku's butt, attacking the new girl may not be a good course of action. He growled and shoved his hands into his pockets and turned away. This isn't over, not for a long shot. You hear me, Deku? Fish Beach? He walked away, leaving a terrified Izuku and a mostly confused Star. Once Izuku gained his bearings, he grabbed his notebook and opened to the next empty page. He looked to Star with a written on his face. What was that? Star grinned. It's like I said. It's magic. I can preform it with my wand. Izuku was in awe. It was obviously not a quirk, as she had proven with having to use the wand. He wrote this down. Who are you? She grinned and made a rainbow with her wand. I am Star Butterfly, magical princess from another dimension. Izuku paused. That sounded straight out of an anime. It didn't make sense, though. The fancy people earlier were clearly her parents. He thought to himself, so, if she can do magic? I wonder if they have quirks where she's from. I've heard of the theory of different dimensions, and I suppose it makes sense. Although, how can they be traveled? Is it like the magic? Perhaps Shiku. Star shooshed at him. Deku, you're mumbling. Izuku blushed. Oh, that's a bad habit of mine. Wait. He gave her a perplexed look. Did you call me Deku? She gave him a perplexed look. Well, that boy called you that, right? I assumed it was some sort of nickname. Izuku blushed and rubbed his neck. Ah, well, it's more of an insult, really. Star gazed at him for a few seconds before her eyes widened in realization. Oh, he's a bully. Izuku went to deny it, but the worried gaze Star was giving him made the words die in his throats. Instead, he hung his head slightly. Yeah. Star furrowed her eyebrows. What an idiot. I ought to give him a piece of my mind. She went to turn around, and Izuku reached out and grabbed her shoulder. No, don't. She spun around, very confused. Izuku blushed and let go. How could he explain that he was used to this? He frowned. Not all men are created equal. Star rose an eyebrow. Wah. Izuku blushed. What I mean is, He shook his head, gaining what little composure he had left. A long time ago, in a city in China, a child was born. He glowed with a brilliant light, shocking both doctors and his parents. After that, instances of superhuman abilities began to pop up all over the globe. Soon, more than 80% of the populations had these quirks. And with all this, villains began to pop up everywhere. This brought on a new profession amongst quirk users. Heroes. A new age was born. Star was still confused. That's great and all, but what does that have to do with your bully? Izuku blushed. I belong to the other 20% of the population. I don't have a quirk. Star's eyes widened for the third time that day. Then she furrowed her eyebrows. Well, that's not fair. Just because you're weaker than him doesn't mean he can bully you like that. Izuku's face turned bright red. This girl that he just met was defending him. He sighed. It's okay. Really, I'm used to it. It's been this way for about 10 years. We actually used to be friends. Izuku almost wanted to laugh at the irony of his situation. Suddenly, he felt a pair of arms envelope him. I'm sorry, Izuku. The teen froze. He was currently being hugged by a girl, a pretty girl, that he just met. Once she let go, Star noticed that Izuku was malfunctioning. His face was bright red, and his hands were twitching with surprise. I gotta go. He took off in a mad dash in the other direction, leaving a confused Star all alone in a strange place. She sighed and pulled out a piece of paper. Now, how do you read a map? Izuku was blushing like mad still, but he had regained some semblance of brain activity other than survive. Still, he was having a bit of trouble thinking about it. I got hugged by a girl that I just met. I can't believe I could do something so perverted. Am I even a virgin still? During his inner freakout, he slammed directly into someone's back. His bag fell off his shoulders, and his things fell out. He looked up to give an apology to the person he bumped into, but froze in fear when he looked up. What are you doing, Deku? Izuku stuttered out an apology, but Katsuki slammed his hand into his face and knocked him back a few feet. Izuku whimpered in pain, and Katsuki took a step forward. He stepped on a familiar notebook, and his attention was momentarily switched. He picked the notebook up before snorting. Really, Deku? You're still trying to be a hero? Izuku stood up and went to reach for the notebook. Katsuki pulled it back and set off an explosion. The book was charred. The young green-haired teen let out an anguished cry, and the blonde explosion user grabbed Izuku's shoulder with a savage grin. You know, Deku, while you were gone, the teacher said something pretty stupid. That you were applying for UA? Now, I know you wouldn't do that, would you, Deku? His shoulder began to smolder, and Izuku winced. Katsuki got closer. You apply for that school, and I'll kill you." He let go and walked in the other direction, throwing the book out a window as he went. He turned back and grinned. "If you want to be a hero that bad, why don't you pray you have a quirk in your next life and take a swan dive off the roof?" Izuku's heart seized. Katsuki was mean, sure, but he had never told anyone to outright kill themselves. He looked out the window and noticed that his notebook was laying in a koi pool. He sighed and made his way outside. Hours later, Star had finally found a way to navigate the map. School had ended a while ago, so she was making her way to where she was staying while she was on Earth. It had been pretty crazy, although it was a lot more relaxed than what she was used to. Her mind wandered back to the boy from earlier, Izuku. It was kind of weird that she ran away from him. Kind of mean, too. She looked over to the side. Everyone was gathered there. That was kind of weird. She made her way over and saw that there was a big sludge monster there. Star readied her wand. "It's a monster." She looked again and noticed that it had someone in its slimy grip. A familiar, jagged blonde head of hair. It was the bully boy. She didn't like him, but it wasn't right to leave him there. She noticed a few people fighting it as well. Those must be the heroes that Izuku mentioned. She went to take a step, but someone beat her to it. The sound of frantic footsteps headed into the direction of the monster, or was it Villain, made Star turn her head to the side. She recognized that boy. It was Izuku, heading straight for the Villain. He threw his backpack at the Villain, getting a lucky hit, and began to help his bully. Star's eyes widened, diamonds dancing in them. She could hear what he said. "Kachan, I couldn't just stand there and watch you die." The sludge man turned back and began to ready his attack. Star raised her wand. Mega, Detroit, smash. Suddenly, the monster was no more, and a gust of wind shot everywhere, directed mostly for the sky. Star watched in awe, seeing the absolutely beautiful stranger raise his hand up with a huge grin. He jumped into the sky and was gone as soon as he appeared. Star was shaken from her stupor and ran forward. Izuku was being scolded by the heroes that were already there, but she grabbed him and picked him up. He looked surprised to see her. "Wow, Izuku, that was amazing." He blushed and looked down. "Hey, Star, I didn't do really much of anything." Star shrugged. It was still cool. "By the way, who was that guy that saved you?" At this point, the heroes had given up on their lecture, and the two teens were heading out. Izuku was excitedly telling Star about All Might, and Star was excitingly listening. He stopped and looked at the girl apologetically. "I'm sorry for leaving you behind earlier." She smiled and patted him. "Ah, how sweet." "It's okay." He blushed, and a loud voice interrupted them. "Hey, DKU, don't think I owe you anything. You didn't do anything, you hear me?" Star went to say something, but Izuku grabbed her and shook his head. A small smile was on his face. "He's right. I didn't do anything." Star sighed and looked back to the retreating figure of Katsuki Bakugo. "He'll get his just desserts one of these days." Izuku grinned. "Maybe." They turned around, and a huge figure dashed out from behind them. "Young Midoriya." Izuku screamed, and Star also did this. The hulking man Star recognized as All Might then poofed away in a puff of smoke, revealing a near skeleton of a man. Star's eyes widened in surprise, and All Might had just noticed her. No, that's two in one day, Tashinori. You need to get your act together." The man barricaded himself, but then held a hand up to get his bearings back. Izuku was looking at the man in confusion. "All Might, what are you doing here?" The man looked at Star, then sighed. "Can your friend keep a secret?" Izuku looked over to Star, who was nodding her head up and down enthusiastically. All Might sighed. "Okay then, young man, today you show me something. That it doesn't matter if you have a quirk or not." Izuku could feel his chest clench. Is he about to say what he thinks? "You, young man, can be a hero. Meet me at Dagoba Beach, 6 o'clock, sharp tomorrow morning." Izuku was almost in tears, and Star was looking at them in awe. "Oh, can I come?" Both of the Earthlings looked at her in confusion. All Might shrugged. "I don't see why not." Izuku was still a loss for words, and All Might turned muscly and shot into the air, exiting the chapter like a hero. Star was bouncing up and down. "He's so cool." Izuku nodded. "That he is." They watched him retreat for a minute before heading home. Izuku suddenly had a thought. "Say, where are you staying?" Star pulled out the map and pointed to the marked address. Izuku looked at it for a minute. He smiled and kept walking. Oh, cool. That's my house. Then he froze. Wait, that's my house. Star watched as the boy turned a bright red and stopped moving. Star frowned. That was the second time today that she had broken him. She sighed and hoisted him over her shoulder and headed to the house that they were going to share. Izuku regained composure once they entered the house. His mother smiled at him and apologized. I'm sorry, sweetie. I guess it slipped my mind. Do you mind showing her to the guest room? Izuku nodded and showed her to the bland guest room in their house. She shook her head. This just won't do. Sparkle glitter bomb expand. The house shook and the guest room was transformed into a 3-story bedroom fit for royalty. Star hopped on her bed. Oh, this is nice. Izuku felt like things just got a lot more interesting. When Izuku awoke to the sound of barking, he knew something was off. Had his mother brought home a dog? No, he didn't remember that. Was it coming from outside? No, definitely inside, and close from the sound of it. Why would it sound like there were dogs in his room? Did someone? Hey, Deku, you're mumbling. He paused and blushed. Oh yeah, Star Butterfly. Currently, there was a blonde alien princess standing in his room, admiring his all-might memorabilia. He checked the time and noticed that it was 4:40 sharp. He rose from bed and stopped abruptly. There was a blonde alien princess standing in his room, admiring his all-might memorabilia. Princess, as in female. In his room, while he was asleep, in nothing but his boxers. Star walked over and poked his flabby stomach. Squish. Izuku immediately turned a bright red and wrapped himself in his comforter. Star gave him a big smile. Good morning, sleepyhead. You better get ready, if we want to be at the beach on time. Beach. Beach. Izuku sprung out of bed and immediately began to throw some clothes on. He didn't even care if Star was still in his room, and he was practically naked. Okay, maybe he did care immensely and was shaking like a leaf, despite his hurried speed and accuracy. But All Might took priority. Then he noticed something else. A litter of puppies sat on his floor, cutely looking around. He glanced at Star. Okay, I have several questions. Star happily swayed back and forth as she inspected one of his older figures. Ask away. Izuku held up a hand, counting off each one of his questions. First, why are there puppies in my room? Second, why are you in my room? And third, why didn't you wake me up sooner? Also, did you call me Deku again? Star thought for a moment and mimicked Izuku's hand thing. Because puppies are cute. Because I came to wake you up. Because you're cute when you're asleep, and you have all this cool stuff. And yeah, I like it as a nickname. It's cute. Izuku blushed bright red at the sheer number of times she said cute. He was at a loss for words, and he just sighed. Okay then, you can call me Deku. Star beamed, figuratively. Then one of the puppies beamed. Literally. From the eyes. A laser beam puppy. Izuku jumped back in shock. Did that puppy just shoot lasers out of its eyes? Star nodded, her eyes filled with her namesake. Yes, isn't cool? Izuku went to protest on how dangerous that was, but then noticed that the area that got hit didn't actually look damaged. More like someone threw a pencil at his computer. He sighed. He looked at his watch again. 4:49. 9 minutes for all of that? Strange. Izuku noticed that the girl was already dressed, so he made a hand gesture for her to follow. Okay then, let's get going. Star skipped happily beside him, and he smiled softly at her energy. She was kind of the exact opposite of him. Outgoing, happy, positive. Then again, she didn't have the 10 years of physical and mental abuse that kept Izuku nice and humbly a pushover. So, although the green-haired teen does remember a time, before he found out he was quirkless, where he was just like her, he sighed. Star seemed to notice, and slowed considerably, looking at him with a confused and concerned look. Hey, Deku, what's up? He blushed. Had he been that obvious? He waved his hands frantically. Nothing. Just reminiscing. Star gave him a confused glance before she began to happily skip again. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. He really didn't want to talk about his problems, but he did have a question for Star. He looked to her. Hey, Star, why were you sent to Earth? If you don't mind me asking, of course. She grinned to him. Of course not. You see, I got my wand from my mom recently, as part of family tradition is to pass down the wand of the air when they're old enough, so I just got it. But after I destroyed nearly the entire castle town, they sent me here to practice and learn my magic. After all, Earth doesn't have any magic. Well, except for those quirks or whatever. Oh, and guess what? I even have a spell book that I'm supposed to study. Although, I much prefer the point-and-shoot method. Izuku nodded dumbly and decided to pull out his notebook, doing a quick sketch of Star and writing a few things down. He hadn't seen her do any fighting yet, but he had the feeling she could be pretty formidable. The girl looked over his shoulder and into the book, and stars danced in her eyes. Oh, what's that? Izuku jumped in surprise and blushed, holding the book close to his chest. Oh, it's a... She looked at the cover and squinted. Hero Analysis for the Future. 13? Sounds cool. Can I see? She watched him expectantly, and Izuku gently handed over the book. Star flipped through the pages, her eyes sparkling with awe at each one. Wow, you know everything about these guys. Izuku blushed and hid his face. Well, I wouldn't say everything. Star scoffed and threw an arm around the stuttering boy. Whatever, dude. The green teen burned red at the close contact from his new friend, but didn't say anything about it. Soon, Dagoba Municipal Beach came into view, as well as the literal mountains of trash that littered it. Star looked at the sight with wide eyes. Whoa, that's a lot of trash. Izuku nodded, and a voice called out to them from the beach. Ah, young Midoriya, and Miss Butterfly as well. They turned around and saw a muscular All Might standing there, gleaming in the sunlight. Izuku grinned. All Might. The man looked at them with his signature smile, before spewing vital fluid from his mouth. Izuku screamed, and Star screamed. All Might, or Tashinori Yagi, coughed gently and wiped the vital fluid from his lips. He gave the two a small smile. I'm glad you could make it. I knew you would. Tashinori spread his arms. Young man, this is your training. Izuku was confused. What? The blonde man looked at the quirkless teen. Tell me, what do you know about this beach? Izuku thought for a moment. Well, the ocean currents bring all the trash that's dumped into the water here, and it sort of became a dumping grounds for everyone. Although it was apparently beautiful before that. Star frowned. Oh wow, that's kind of sad. All Might nodded. Indeed it is. That's why you, Izuku, are going to clean this entire beach. You have exactly 10 months to get ready for the UA entrance exam, and until then we're going to cultivate your body until you are ready to inherit my quirk. Izuku paused. Wait, inherit your quirk? All Might nodded. Yes, my quirk is called One for All. It's a stockpiling power quirk that can be passed down throughout the generations. I am the 8th holder of the power, and you, young Midoriya, will be the 9th. Izuku's eyes were wide. That's crazy. Passing down quirks is unheard of. I wonder if there are any other quirks that can be passed down. How does that even happen? Scientists don't know a lot about how quirks are passed down, and he was cut off when Star gave him a pat on the back. It's magic Deku. The boy looked at her sheepishly and realized he must have been mumbling. He entertained the thought briefly, but turned back to All Might to make sure he didn't go into another mumbling fit. The hero looked at the two. You could understand all of that? Star smiled widely. Yep, it wasn't that hard. I've heard way nerdier rants. You should meet my ex-boyfriend, Tom. Wait, Tom is terrible, never mind. All Might shook his head. Anyways, you have to build your body up in order to handle this quirk. Otherwise, its sheer power could blow your limbs off in all directions. Izuku stepped back in fear. Explode. All Might turned muscular and gave him a thumbs up. Yes, let's get started. Star sat on top of a large refrigerator, sitting alongside All Might, who was cheering Izuku on. She was yelling her own encouraging words to the teen. Come on, young Midoriya. At this rate, you'll never clean this beach up in time for the entrance exams. The boy was pulling the refrigerator with all his might, but the combined weight of both her and his mentor was not helping. Suddenly, All Might jumped down and took a picture of the boy with his phone. Star couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but she could see that Izuku had tears flowing from his eyes, so that much was normal. Then, All Might lifted her with ease off of the refrigerator and set her down. He then proceeded to crush the refrigerator with one hand, and the shockwave that resulted knocked off a small portion of the trash away. He grinned at Izuku. You can make this power yours, young man. All you have to do is follow my aim to pass American Dream Plan. Star didn't know what a dream plan was, and she was still in awe from the display of strength. Izuku looked at the paper and whistled. You've even got my sleep planned out. Whoa. All Might nodded. This schedule was specifically created to match you and your body. It's going to get you in shape efficiently without hurting you. Star grinned. Man, Izuku, you're going to be really strong. Maybe I should bring my own mentor and train as well. All Might rose an eyebrow. Perhaps both of you training alongside each other will further your progress even more. Yes, the hero nodded. He then pointed at Star. Young lady, bring your mentor tomorrow. We will make you both able-bodied heroes yet. Star cheered, and Izuku grinned. The day continued on, and Izuku returned home, sore and tired. Star was as excited as ever, and they bounced in, seeing Izuku's mom worriedly looking at him. Oh, Izuku, you're home. Where have you been? Her face scrunched up. And why do you smell like garbage? Izuku smiled. Oh, just doing some community service nearby. Don't worry. I'll take a shower and come eat. He walked by, and Star ran past the woman. Hey, Ms. Midoriya. The woman looked dazed as the girl ran past. Hello, Star. Izuku gave Star an odd look as she played with his action figures of various pro heroes. She had Eraserhead and Midnight and was moving them back and forth. She went over to Eraserhead. Hello there, pretty lady. She went over to Midnight. Hello, scraggly man. Izuku shook his head at her antics. You know their names, Star? She grinned. I know. The green teen sighed. Then he remembered a thought he had. You said you have a spell book and a mentor, right? She nodded. Yep. Izuku continued. So you're going to bring those for tomorrow's training? She nodded once more. Yep. The boy nodded as well. Okay, so where does he live? She looked over to him. He's in the book. Izuku paused. The book? Star nodded and put the action figures up. His name is Glossaric, and he lives in the spell book. He's magic. Izuku nodded. Oh yeah, magic. To say that he was still getting used to that was an understatement. But it wasn't the only thing he'd have to get used to, he supposed. Star walked out of his room. Okay, I'm going to bed. Good night, Deku. He smiled. Good night, Star. He lay back on his bed. It couldn't be that bad, right? Izuku stared at the flaming gas station that was near the beach in horror. All Might stared at it with slight worry. Meanwhile, Star was flipping through the book with a hurried pace. Glossaric. Is there a spell to put out fire? The little blue man that floated above Izuku's hair frowned and looked inside his empty pudding cup. I'm afraid that there isn't enough pudding for that information. Star groaned. Deku, pudding him. Izuku tossed the man one of the many pudding cups that he had in an insulated bag. The man opened the package greedily. Page 42. Izuku blanched at the little blue man, and then at Star, who was trying to put the fire out and not doing the good. He looked up to Glossaric. Should we help? The little blue man shook his head. She needs the training. All Might shot an apologetic look to the owner of the store, who glared at the hero angrily. Izuku sighed. He had the feeling this was going to be a very long 10 months. A very muscular amphibian watched the fire rage from a tree nearby. He grinned as he saw a head of blonde hair and a magic beam shoot out of a wand. He picked up his little walkie-talkie. Master Toffee, we have visual on Star Butterfly. A smooth voice came from the other side of the walkie-talkie. Very good. We won't strike just yet, though. The frog could almost feel the malicious grin from the other side. Stand back for now. We will attack the princess when the time is right. The frog nodded. Yes, Master Toffee. The walkie-talkie went out, and Toffee dusted off his suit. He looked to a little bird man beside him. Servant, bring me some coffee. The little bird man nodded. Of course, Master Toffee. Oh, and could you call me Ludo, please? The tall lizard man looked down. No. Ludo's eyes shone with unshed tears. Of course. I'll be right with you, Master Toffee. And he ran to the other room to fulfill his orders. Star watched in awe as Izuku screamed at the top of his lungs, standing on the top of the final garbage pile that he cleaned. Whoa! He began tipping forward, and Star ran towards him. However, All Might beat her to it, catching the green-headed teen in his tree trunk-like arms. He set him down, and Izuku grinned at him shakily. All Might set a hand on his shoulder. Young Midoriya, you have excelled at your training. You even cleaned beyond the area I told you to. You really are ready to inherit my power. Izuku smiled and looked at All Might. Are you sure that I deserve this? All Might laughed. Look at this, Izuku. He pulled out the picture that he had taken 10 months ago. Star looked over at the picture and back at Izuku. She had to admit, he had gotten a lot more fit. All Might put the phone away and gestured to the boy. And now look at yourself. Started a pan down of Izuku's chiseled torso and blushed. She wiped a little bit of drool from her mouth and put an arm around Izuku. She grinned. Yeah, Deku, look at you getting all hot and stuff. Izuku burned red, and Star laughed, despite being a bright red herself. All Might chuckled, and then plucked one of his hairs from his head. Okay, settle down. It's time to inherit my power. Izuku looked up to the hero, a determined expression etched onto his face. Star watched in anticipation. All Might held the hair up. Eat this. Time stopped. Izuku gave All Might a deadpan look. Star's look didn't change. What? All Might suddenly got bashful. Look, you have to consume some of my DNA in order to get one for all. This is the easiest way to do it. Izuku nodded and grabbed the hair. The tension returned, and now Star excitedly watched Izuku put the hair to his face. The UA entrance exam had drawn a huge crowd, obviously. Star and Izuku walked side by side. Izuku nervously fidgeting with his backpack strap, and Star excitedly humming while twirling her wand. She grinned over to the green-haired teen. How do you feel? He looked up. Nervous. She laughed. No, I meant the power. He chuckled and put a hand to his chest. Well, I don't feel any different. Just some indigestion from that hair. He shuddered involuntarily. Star shrugged and continued to skip forward. I'm super ready to cause major damage, even if I do all the time. Izuku grinned. Yeah, except this time it's legal. Star waved the boy off. Whatever, Deku. Those cops are great. The teen chuckled. They like you too. I'd say it's odd, but it's weirder not to like you. I think even Kachan likes you. As if on K, and voice called out from behind them. Hey, Deku Blondie. They turned around and saw a grumpy-looking Katsuki Bakugo walking towards them. He gave Izuku a disapproving look. So you still applied, huh, nerd? Izuku just looked at the other boy, a steely look in his eyes. Katsuki scoffed. You won't make it past the entrance exam. He walked away, Izuku watching him recede, and Star giving him a not-so-subtle glare. Izuku sighed and put a hand on the blonde princess back. It's fine, Star. Ever since the Villian incident 10 months ago, he's gone a lot easier on me. Honestly, I think he thinks I might actually pass. I'm sure it makes him pretty mad. Star gave the green-haired teen a smile. Well, I know you'll pass. You've gotten this far. He grinned, his eyes shining with determination. You too, Star. Then he tripped. Or I'll just die here. He suddenly stopped and looked up, seeing Star grinning and holding him up by the strap of his bag. She helped him up. That could have been bad. Don't want you messing up that pretty face of yours. She teased. Although he was used to it by now, the teasing still made him turn bright red as his vital fluid ran to his face. He wasn't denying it was nice having someone compliment him all the time, though. A pretty girl, no less. His blush deepened. It's just teasing. Nothing like that. Star's blush that he didn't notice said otherwise. A yell rang through the air, and they all turned to the source. An angry Katsuki Bakugo was yelling at a girl with a round face and brown bob hair. She looked confused and scared, and was slowly backing away from the explosive boy. Said boy looked around and saw everyone staring. He turned around and huffily walked into the building. The girl stood there, and Star and Izuku went up to her. Star waved. Hey. She looked around until she spotted the two other teens. Izuku smiled shakily. Don't take it personally, Kachan is always like that. She rose an eyebrow. You know that guy? Izuku nodded. We went to the same middle school. Star grinned. Me too. The other girl smiled. Well then, I feel better about it. Star gave her a curious look. What exactly did you do? She looked down at her hands and blushed. Well, he tripped on a loose tile here, and I used my quirk, gravity, to save him before he hit the ground. When he found out, though, he went off, saying that he didn't want my help, and to stop looking down on him, round-faced. Izuka nodded. That sounds like Kachan. Star nodded as well. He's a huge idiot. She wrinkled her nose. Makes you wonder if he's actually fit to be a hero. As soon as she said it, she blushed and covered her mouth. Oh my, that was out of line, sorry. Star waved it off. I've thought the same thing. Izuka here, though, just can't see the guy in a bad light. Izuka nodded. Kachan may be abrasive, they scoffed, but he is very determined to be a hero. And he does anything he says he'll do. The girl nodded, and then blushed. Oh, wow. I haven't even introduced myself. I'm Achiko Uraraka. Izuka smiled. I'm Izuka Midoriya. Nice to meet you, Uraraka. Star grinned. I'm Star Butterfly, magical princess from another dimension. Nice to meet ya, Achiko. Achiko gave the girl a confused look. Another dimension? Izuku held a hand up. It's a really long story, and the welcome speech is in 5 minutes. The girl gasped. 5 minutes. I'll see you guys later. Nice meeting you. She ran into the building, leaving Star and Izuku to go find their seats on their own. Star grinned at the green-haired boy. Let's go then. Izuka nodded, and they entered the building. The auditorium was huge and full of applying students. Not all of them would get into school, of course, but it was still kind of surreal to see. Izuka listened intently to present Mike as he gave the speech. Star sat to the left, grinning widely, and Katsuki sat to the right, a bored glare not really directed at anyone on his face. The pro hero on the stage mentioned something about the entrance exam, and Izuku looked down to his and Star's cards. We're in different zones. Must be because we go to the same school. They don't want us helping each other. Star nodded enthusiastically. Hey, I'm just here to destroy stuff. Katsuki growled. Can you two nerds shut it? At about the same time, an applicant that had been speaking turned and pointed. And you, plain-looking boy, an excited girl. You've been muttering this entire time. Can you please stop it? Some of us actually want to be here. Izuku blushed red, and Star paid the boy no mind, but kept quiet anyway. After he was done, Present Mike continued. See, the big zero-pointers are really just obstacles. I probably steer clear of those guys. The pre-exam speech continued, and once it was done, everyone went to their designated area. Izuku stood quietly in his area, and he saw the boy from the speech stretching in the corner. Someone called out to him, Hey, you're Izuku, right? He turned around and saw the girl, Achiko Uraraka, coming up to him. He smiled. Yeah. Hey, Uraraka. Good luck out there. She smiled. You too. She walked over to a door and began to stretch herself. Izuku scratched his chin and thought, I just got one for all. I haven't even had a chance to test it out yet, so I don't know exactly what I can do. He frowned. Maybe I can get some points of my own accord? I have grown dramatically stronger over the past 10 months. Suddenly the alarm sounded, and everyone was gone. Izuku stood there for a few seconds, dumbfounded before sprinting off in a hurry. He grit his teeth and ran as fast as he could. Soon a one-point robot spun into view, and Izuku gave a strong right hook out of reflex. The robot slid a couple of feet, and there was a noticeable dent in its side. Izuku, on the other hand, was clutching his hand in pain. Tears threatened to leak out of his eyes. Come on, Midoriya, he muttered to himself. That really hurt, but we got to get some points. A huge boom was heard, and Izuku turned, seeing a huge rainbow emerge from a few areas over. He grinned fondly. He only knew of one person that could preform such a magical feat. Star Butterfly was definitely enjoying herself. The blonde interdimensional princess grinned as she blasted the robots into piles of smoldering metals, easily racking up points. The judges had allowed her to bring her wand into the exam, as it played directly into her quirk. Not that she couldn't do anything without it, but it certainly helped. Some may have seen it as cheating, but Star didn't care. She was having fun destroying the robots, so that's what she was doing. With the great stride she had made in the 10 months training alongside Izuku, her magic was at the highest she had ever seen. Star grinned at the thought. Her parents were right to send her to Earth to get a better grasp on magic, as in the time she had been here, she had learned tons. She pointed her wand at a 3-pointer. Nuclear rainbow warhead. A huge explosion ripped throughout the arena, and shot several feet in the air. She grinned. Izuku probably saw that. A small blush spread on her cheeks as she thought of the awkward green teen. She shook her head. Crushing on her best friend would have to wait until after the exam. Wait, what? When Izuku felt a second thunderous noise, he assumed it was Star again. But once the third hit and yelling and screaming could be heard, he decided to turn around. A huge robot, easily 2 or 3 of the buildings tall, making its way towards him. Izuku froze in fear, trying to get away, but he couldn't move. Then he saw a girl trapped in some rubble, and immediately began running. He got a closer look and saw that it was Uraraka, the gravity girl from before. He began running faster, people that were running the other way looking at him incredulously. He bent his knees on instinct, similarly to how he saw All Might do it, and felt a rush of power shoot through his body, and his eyes widened. He launched in the air at high speeds and reared his arm back, clenching his fist tightly. The same power spread to his arm, and he screamed at the top of his lungs. Smash! Star had been watching from a building in her own zone, the huge robot putting sparkles in her big blue eyes. It was huge and wreaking havoc all over the other zone. It was awesome. Then it only got better when a familiar launched into the air and slammed into the robot with enough force to demolish it with one hit. Star's eyes widened at the show of power, as well as the accompanying yell that came with it. Smash! Star put her hands to her face. Was that Deku? She grinned and put her hands to her mouth. Way to go, DKU. That's my boy. Izuku heard his friends yell and grinned. Of course Star saw that. But all those other times when he was trying to impress her, his thoughts were interrupted by the fact that he was falling very fast towards the ground at a very fast rate. His legs were bruised and sore, but his arm felt fractured and hurt to move. He was honestly expecting more backlash the way that All Might had talked. Perhaps training alongside Star helped? It didn't matter at the moment. He positioned himself and got ready to land, clenching everything. It was going to hurt, but he'd rather not. Smack! He was dazed for a moment, before falling to the ground much more softly. He looked over to the side and saw Uraraka vomiting some sort of rainbow substance. He winced and walked over to her. Hey, are you all right? She held up a weak thumbs up. Yeah, all good. Just a little herb. She gagged again and covered her mouth before slumping over on the piece of metal she was on. A voice ripped through the air. Time's up. Izuku felt his world crumble. He hadn't gotten a single point. He covered his mouth. No way. That can't be it. I didn't even get a point. An older voice came from the gate, and a short lady was walking towards them. He recognized her immediately from his notebook. It was the youthful heroine recovery girl. She was doing healing. She got to him and looked at his arm. Who? That's a pretty good fracture there, Sonny. Here, let me. He held a hand out. Heal her first. She looked surprised. Oh, what a gentleman. Izuku chuckled and shook his head. She needs it more than I do at the moment, so that's the heroic thing to do. She smiled and gave a smooch to the top of the unconscious Uraraka's head. The girl groggily got up and stretched. Her eyes widened. Wow, I feel brand new. Thanks. The old lady waved her hand. All in a day's work. Now for you, young man. She kissed his arm, and Izuku felt it heal back and the soreness leave his legs. Unfortunately, he also became very groggy. Must be a side effect to the healing. He grinned. Thank you very much. She nodded and smiled. All the contestants began leaving, and Izuku and Uraraka met with Star outside, who tackled Izuku in a hug immediately. She grinned, and Izuku blushed. I saw you, Deku. You took out that big guy with one hit. It was awesome. He grinned sheepishly and rubbed the back of his neck. You also looked like you were causing some major property damage. She grinned. Yeah, I was. It was great. I got like 58 points. Izuku's eyes widened. That's great, Star. You'll definitely get in with a score like that. She grinned. You think so? The green tea nodded. I know so. She squeed, jumped up and down. Then she stopped and looked at the messy-haired boy. How many? He looked at her perplexed. How many what? She rolled her eyes. How many points did you get, dum-dum? His eyes widened in realization, and then he looked down. I, didn't get any points. She looked confused for a moment. before her eyes widened in realization. Oh, 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 that's not good. Izuku felt embarrassed and miserable at the same time. Star sighed and put an arm around him. Okay then, let's go then, Deku. I'm sure we can figure something out. The depressed teen didn't say a word, and they soundlessly went home. When Izuku's mother inquired about the exams, Star had to explain what happened for the first time ever. Izuku sat wordlessly on the couch, using his grip strengthener. Mama Midoriya frowned worriedly at her son. Star smiled. Don't worry, they'll bounce back in no time. 2 weeks later, and Izuku had barely said anything, usually spacing out into his own little world. Miss Midoriya had gotten progressively more worried, and Star was just bored with how Izuku was acting. Plus, waiting for the results sucked. She was staring at Izuku, who was staring off into space with his grip strengthener, when his mother came in with 2 envelopes. She tried to scramble to her feet, but failed and held the envelopes up, revealing the large wax insignia of UA High. She had a frantic look. They're here. Your results from UA. They both excitedly grabbed the envelopes and ran to Izuku's room. Star tore hers open and looked at the note. It's on young Midoriya's. She showed it to him, and Izuku's mind was already quick at work. It was most likely for convenience. But why would they send 2 envelopes? Maybe it was a legal thing. He was thrown out of his thoughts by an excited Star who told him to throw the disc down. It sprang to life with a holographic image of All Might. Hello there, young Midoriya, Miss Butterfly. I am here with your results. All Might grinned widely like normal and turned to Star. How he knew she'd be standing there, they didn't know, but he held a thumbs up, even though your scores on the written exam were He coughed and looked the paper with several doodles and glitter rainbows and the like, and turned back. Interesting, you still made it to UA with a score of 58 combat points. Star cheered, and Izuku grinned. Good job, Star. All Might turned to him next. But I'm not done. Young Midoriya, you passed the written test with flying colors, as I am sure was expected. However, you failed the practice exam, with a total of 0 combat points. Izuku looked down, and Star gave him a worried glance and pat him on the back. All Might continued. However, that is not all that goes into consideration. There is one other criterion for heroes in training, and that is how willing you are to do what really defines what a hero is. Self-sacrifice. We have what you call rescue points. So, young Midoriya, with this in mind, Izuku's eyes widened when he saw his name on the leaderboard right above Star's. With 70 rescue points and no combat points. Izuku Midoriya, you have passed the UA entrance exam. Star had a total of 10 rescue points, so that added up to 68, and they were second and third place. Izuku felt tears brimming in his eyes. Only Kachan had beat them, and Uraraka was in 4th place. All Might's grin seemed to grow wider. UA is now your hero academia. Izuku awoke to a very excited Star to jump on top of him. He may have screamed. He sat up quickly and watched as Star bounced around his room excitedly. His mom peeked in, still looking mostly asleep. Izuku dear, are you okay? The green teen breathed in deeply to calm his heart and smiled shakily. Yeah, Mom, it's just Star. She nodded understandingly and yawned. Oh well, I'm going back to sleep. He turned to his friend, who was grinning at him still. He rose an eyebrow. What is it, Star? She got in his face. Don't tell me you forgot. Deku, today is the first day of UA. His eyes widened in realization before he threw off his covers and rushed to get dressed. Then, he turned to Star. Oh yeah, he turned bright red and quickly pushed her out of the door. Once she was out, Star wiped a little bit of drool that was threatening to come out of her mouth away and blushed. She should probably get ready herself. She grabbed her star-shaped purse and grinned. All done. Izuku frowned at his tie, which was entirely too short, and sighed. It wasn't technically breaking any uniform rules, but it didn't look right to him. However, he didn't have time to worry about it, as Star was currently dragging him out of the house excitedly. His mother watched them go by with a cup of coffee and waved goodbye at the regular sight. Once they were outside, Izuku gave the princess an amused look. I've never seen you so excited for school, Star. She grinned at him, her eyes sparkling. Well, this is better school. We get to do fun stuff. Izuku chuckled. We'll still have academics, Star. You aren't going to be able to get out of that. Star shrugged. That's what I got you for, Deku. You can help me with the boring stuff. Izuku gave a sheepish smile. That's what it'll come down to, huh? If Star heard him, she didn't say anything. Once they reached the front gates of UA, Izuku stopped, admiring the beauty of the huge school that he worked so hard to get into. Star watched him, a small smile gracing her face. It was cute to see him so excited. Wait. Suddenly, a voice echoed out from behind them, and they turned around. Uraraka ran towards them, waving her arm and grinning. Hey, Izuku, Star. They turned and smiled. Star waved back. Hey there, Ochako. The girl caught up them, lightly panting from a run. She smiled. So what class are you two in? Izuku looked at the share schedule that the both of them held. Well, both Star and I are in Class 1A. What about you? Her eyes widened in surprise, and she smiled. Oh, cool. We have the same class. I'm in 1A as well. Star grinned. Hey, that's great. We could be like a troublesome trio. Izuku smiled sheepishly. That doesn't sound very heroic. Uraraka laughed. Maybe not, but it does sound fun. The princess grinned. Yep, and fun is what I'm all about. Izuku chuckled. Hey, let's get to class before we're late. The three of them made their way to their class. Before they walked in, Izuku smiled nervously. Maybe we'll get lucky and Kachan won't be in here. Star glared at no one in particular. I hope so. That dude is an idiot. Uraraka nodded. Yeah, he seemed pretty abrasive. The green teen chuckled. I will not deny that. The three opened the door, and first thing they were met with was a sleeping Katsuki Bakugo and an angry blue-haired boy trying to get him to awaken. The blue-haired boy then noticed the door had opened and went to greet his classmates. Hello there. I am Tenya Ilda. Pleasure to meet you. Izuku bowed slightly. Izuku Midoriya. Star waved, a huge grin on her face. Hi, I'm Star Butterfly. I like your legs. The boy blushed slightly at the girl's bluntness. Ochako smiled warmly. I'm Ochako Uraraka. He rose an eyebrow. Well, if I'm correct, you three would be the second, third, and fourth places in the exam. Izuku grinned sheepishly. It's really more of a lucky break. Tenya put a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Nonsense. I saw how you leapt into action and saved Uraraka here with a single punch. It was incredible how you senselessly rushed into danger, less than concerned of your own state. Uraraka blushed, as well as Izuku. Meanwhile, Star felt a strange feeling form in the pit of her stomach at the mention of Izuku's near-death experience. She shook the feeling off and grinned, throwing an arm around the green-haired teen. Yeah, Deku here is pretty cool. Tenya rose an eyebrow. Deku. Izuku blushed. It's an, old nickname. Suddenly, the sound of a chair falling over could be heard. They turned around, and it seemed that Katsuki had woken up at the mention of Izuku's nickname. He spotted the messy-haired greenie and growled, his eyes narrowing with anger. He let off 2 or 3 explosions. Deku, how the hell did you even get into this school, you quirkless wannabe? Everyone but Star rose an eyebrow. He had obviously shown that he had a quirk. Star, meanwhile, looked a little worried at the mention of a quirk. Izuku quietly gulped and grinned. I fought the robots like everyone else. Katsuki looked like he was about to blow up the entire school, as well as being slickly impressed. Are you trying to be a smart, Deku? He was about to punch him, but a dangerous look from behind them stopped him. He lowered his hand and glared at the green net. Next time, Deku, then we'll really talk. They sighed, and a voice echoed out from behind them. Hello, I'm your homeroom teacher, Shoyuta Aizawa. Get in there, you brats, and get ready to learn. He had a universally monotone voice and an even more monotone expression. Everyone filed about and sat down before the lecture got good and started. Aizawa cleared his throat. Get your activity clothes on. We're going outside. A student raised his hand. What about orientation? Aizawa shrugged. Don't care. No one could argue with that. So they all decided to get dressed. Star walked into the dressing room and grinned. She raised her wand in the air, and it let out a bright light. All the girls looked in her direction, waiting for the light to die down. When it did, Star stood there, already clad in her PE uniform, and grinning widely. The rest of the girls were in awe and excitedly asked to be changed as well. Star obliged and waved her wand in a circle, and the same thing happened. A pink-skinned girl walked up to her afterwards and put an arm around her. I really appreciate what you did back there. That's a pretty nifty quirk you've got there. Star waved her hand. Oh, no problem. By the way, I love your horns, and pink is definitely your color. The girl grinned. We're definitely going to get along, miss. Star smiled. Butterfly. Star Butterfly. The girl pat her back. Well, Miss Butterfly, from now on, consider Mina a Shido a friend. Mina walked away, and the rest of the girls made their way outside. Aizawa seemed surprised when they arrived. You all certainly got here quickly. The girls giggled amongst themselves, and Star twirled her wand confidently. Soon after they appeared, they boys approached the field. Almost immediately, Star ran over to Izuku, a big grin on her face. Izuku returned it with his own small, sheepish smile. Once everyone had settled down, their teacher began to explain what the class was doing. Okay, so we're going to assess your abilities. A wave of confusion made its way over the students. Uraraka rose her hand. But the entrance exam? Aizawa didn't look at her. Bakugo. How far could you throw a softball in middle school? Bakugo shrugged. Pretty far, I guess. The man nodded and tossed him a ball he pulled from nowhere. Use your quirk. Mr. Explosion grinned wickedly. Gladly. He gripped the ball tightly and drew his arm back. He launched it in the air, a series of explosions following it. Die! Everyone but Deku and Star were put off by his scream. The two just shared a knowing glance and watched as Aizawa pulled out a ball measurer. He held it up. 705.8 meters. Bakugo nodded. Like I said, pretty far. He put the ball measurer away and turned back to the students. Okay, so we'll go through all these tests, and last place has to leave. He sat on a bench and waited patiently. No one moved. He looked at them impassively. I'll expel all of you if you don't get on with it. The students began to scramble to each of the events in a hurry. Star and Izuku approached the foot race and got ready. Izuku grounded his feet tightly and got ready to run. Star simply waved her wand. Super Big Warnicorn. A buff horse came out of nowhere and picked her up. She grinned at Izuku, who returned the look with a determined smile. They turned their attention back to the sprint. Izuku felt the power of one for all coursing through his body, giving him a boost of energy. His legs burned painfully, but he pushed through. The timer started, and he flashed forward with an incredible speed. Star wasn't far behind, and they finished within milliseconds of each other. Izuku had 5.1 seconds, and Star sat comfortably behind him with 5.3 seconds. The huge horse dude disappeared, and she grinned. Next event? Izuku nodded. Let's go. The next events went by relatively quickly. Star and Izuku stood on a rather playing field. Izuku using one for all for the sprint and the grip test, and Star using her magic wand. Izuku's fingers were bruised and bleeding slickly from small cuts, but they were still very usable. He grinned. The training with All Might had turned out much better than he expected. At least he wasn't breaking all of his bones using his own quirk. Soon, the final event was upon them. Izuku stood in the middle of the ball toss circle, being the final one to go. Starhad went just before him, using her magic to send the ball hurtling over 20 kilometers away. That's like 12 miles for you fellow Americans. It was definitely impressive. Izuku stepped forward and clutched the ball, wincing at the bruises. Aizawa rose an eyebrow, but said nothing as Izuku channeled his power into his arm. This was probably going to hurt, maybe even re-fracture his arm, but he grinned confidently and launched the ball with all his might. It shattered the sound barrier almost immediately, leaving them with sonic boom that knocked everyone back a few feet. The students looked in awe, and Star grinned widely. Izuku felt his hand and winced as he touched his now broken finger. Aizawa noticed this and walked over to him. He gave him a stern look. Look, kid, get a better handle on your quirk. I read your file. I know you're a late bloomer, but that's not an excuse you can use for very long. One day, you may break more than just a finger. Izuku frowned but nodded. Yes, sir. Aizawa stood up and turned to the rest of the class. Okay, time for results. He pulled up the board, and a yellow-haired boy in the back groaned. He was in last place. He had a pained look on his face. Man, it was so hard to get in two. This sucks. Aizawa closed it. Just kidding. None of you are getting expelled. Now I'm going to go nap. Begone with you, heathens. The scruffy man walked away, and the students began to cheer. A voice called out from behind Aizawa. So, I take it you like the new class? He turned around and saw All Might, or Tashinori Yagi, standing there with a small smile on his face. Aizawa shrugged indifferently. They're going to be good kids one day. The one girl worries me, though. What can she do without that thing? On her file, it said she is not to be separate from it. So, I let her use it during the events. But what if someone takes it? All Might laughed. Well, she trained alongside young Midoriya. I'm sure Miss Butterfly will be just fine. Aizawa chuckled. Perhaps so. Star and Izuku walked home, chatting idly as normally. The interdimensional princess happily bounced along, the green teen following her closely and smiling as well. They accidentally bumped into a man in a suit on the way, and Izuku immediately bowed and apologized. I am very sorry. I really have to watch where I am going. The man chuckled. It's fine, kid. No harm done. His voice was low and melodic, but it rubbed Star the wrong way. Izuku smiled sheepishly and looked up. He was a little surprised when he saw that the man was actually a giant lizard in a suit. Although, it technically wasn't the first person like that he had seen. He grinned and turned away, waving goodbye in the process. Sorry again. Oh, and your quirk is cool. The lizard man seemed genuinely surprised, before nodding and walking away. He frowned to himself. Maybe we can use that boy to our advantage. I'll have to call Shigaraki. Star looked over to Izuku once they were away from the lizard man. She frowned. Did something about that guy seem weird to you? Izuku gave her a confused glance. No. Why? Something weird to you? Star shook her head, wondering where she had heard that voice before. Nope, nothing weird here. Despite almost starting every day by waking up with Star poking around his room or jumping on his bed, Izuku still hadn't grown accustomed to the girl running into his room. So, when he woke up peacefully with the rise of the sun and the soft hum of his Saturday morning alarm clock, he knew something was off. He walked out of his room cautiously, already dressed, and silently made his way to the kitchen, where his mother was doing a crossword puzzle and drinking her coffee. He didn't see Star in here either. He frowned. Hey, Mom. The woman jumped and looked over to him. Oh, Izuku, it's just you. What is it, dear? He looked around again, a slightly confused look on his face. Have you seen Star this morning? She wasn't in my room like normal. Now, most parents would be against two teenage housemates that aren't siblings being in the same room together, but Inko Midoriya was well used to the fact that she did it daily. She also knew that neither Izuku or Star would take it that far. Star was far too innocent, and she had raised her son far too well. She smirked. Her parenting skills were unrivaled. Izuku cleared his throat, and his mother shook from her inner monologue. She frowned and shook her head. No, dear. I haven't seen her. Maybe she's still in her room? Izuku nodded. It was a pretty logical answer. Thanks, Mom. He walked away to where Star's room was, leaving behind Inko Midoriya as she continued to pat herself on the back. The green-haired teen approached the wooden door and knocked softly. STA. The door slammed open, and Star looked at him, covered in purple hearts, and yelled, Don't come in. She then quickly slammed the door back shut, leaving a dumbstruck Izuku at the door, fists still raised a knock. He shook his head and frowned. A Star? Are you okay? He leaned against the door, and she cried out from her room. Don't come in. Please. Izuku flinched at the desperation in her voice. His face contorted into a worried expression. Star, what's wrong? There was a long pause, and then Star sighed. I'm going through puberty. Izuku frowned. That sounds like a human thing. Should we call your parents? Star yelped. No. Izuku jumped, and there was an awkward silence. Star blushed a reddish purple in her room. What I mean is, I can handle this on my own. The green-haired teen put his hands back on the door. This isn't going to cause major damage to the property, right, Star? There was another long pause, and then another sigh. Grab the dimensional scissors. They're in the bathroom. Izuku nodded, and quickly made his way to the small bathroom, and grabbed the jewel-encrusted scissors. He had never used them before, and was cautious to do so. He brought them to Star's room, and gently slid them onto the doorway. He listened carefully and heard her tear a hole in the air with the scissors. The door then opened, and Star greeted him, her hand over her eyes and covered in purple hearts. "Come on, we gotta be quick about this." Izuku nodded dumbly and stepped through the portal with Star. Once they arrived, he looked around in awe. The town looked as though it was straight out of a storybook, and it was quite beautiful. He looked forward and saw what he assumed was Muni Castle. He turned to Star and grinned. She pointed higher. "It's up there." He looked higher and past an even bigger castle before looking to the largest castle. His eyes were shining with energy. "Whoa, that's amazing." Star shrugged. "Meh, it's all right." The two began to walk to the castle, and as people noticed her, they ran away screaming. Mostly men, though. Izuku frowned. "Does that have anything to do with your Muberti?" Star didn't answer. He frowned and tapped her on her shoulder. She jumped in surprise before spinning around and looking at him with wide eyes. She was blushing like mad, and the hearts seemed to be popping up faster. Izuku noticed the earbuds in her ears. "Then how did she come off?" "Don't touch me, please. Muberti makes me really vulnerable to boys, and I really don't need to go through that right now. Also, I don't need to hear your voice, so the earbuds." He rose his hand. She frowned. "I can read lips." He slowly put his hand down. Star nodded. "Okay, let's hurry and get to the castle, so we can talk with my parents." She began to briskly walk back up the passage, and Izuku followed suit. He pulled out a small notebook labeled Muni 101 Volume 2 and began to write, mumbling aloud as he did so. Muberti is seemingly an event where Mumin youth goes through a period of increased hormonal behavior, and most likely X-drive. Extremely sensitive to the opposite gender. He closed the notebook and tapped his chin in thought. I wonder if it only affects female Mumans? What evolutionary pattern would be necessary for a feature such as this? If it does only affect female Mumans, it well explains the reason that the female Mumin appears to be the naturally dominant gender to Mumans, unlike on Earth, where it is men. He paused when he noticed that Star stopped. She stood rigidly, fidgeting slightly. "We're here." He nodded and followed along. It wasn't like she could hear him. Star felt like a mess. She was blushing crimson and was mass-producing purple hearts. It didn't help that Izuku was mumbling the entire walk and doing that cute little thing where he taps his pencil to his chin while he thinks. She groaned, wishing that she hadn't given in to temptation and looked back, although she'd much rather see those beautiful abs. She shook her head violently, and purple hearts flew everywhere. Izuku jumped at the sudden outburst, but Star simply kept walking, her blush getting worse. She couldn't be thinking like this. It could jeopardize everyone's safety if she fin-shed the transformation completely free of anything. She had woken up this morning with a purple heart on her forehead and had asked Glossric about it, and she wasn't disappointed. The whole turning into a butterfly creature and going boy crazy didn't sound great to her. Well, there was one boy. She shook her head again, clearing the thought. The princess stopped at a large pair of double doors, and Izuku watched on curiously. The blonde pushed the door open, and the two teens were greeted with Queen Moon and King River idly going over laws and bills. Star cleared her throat, and they looked up. They seemed confused at first, and then a look of surprise washed over them. Queen Moon spoke first. "Star, how did you get here?" Star held up the scissors. "That I borrowed these from Ponyhead a while back. But that's not important right now." A small purple heart popped off and floated gently to the ground. Her mother's eyes widened in realization. "Oh dear. Guards, we need you to take Star to that room. And remember protocol, female knights only." Star gave her mother a confused look. The queen smiled gently. "Don't worry. We'll just keep you down for a few hours, until all of this blows over in a few hours." She went to protest, but then shrugged. Then the knights sent to get her came and escorted her to some room Izuku didn't know about. As soon as Star left the room, the queen turned to her husband. "River, go issue a code 432. We got a big one." The bearded man nodded and ran out of the room. Queen Moon went back to laws and bills. Izuku stood awkwardly at the front of the room and cleared his throat. The queen looked up. Izuku blushed. Is there anything I can do to help? Queen Moon looked at him. Oh, no. Another awkward silence filled the air. Neither of the parties involved were very enthusiastic either. The green-haired teen was stiff and crimson-red in the face, while Queen Moon simply spun her pencil in her hand and looked around uncomfortably. Who are you again? Moon seemed very embarrassed and uncomfortable, which only furthered Izuku's own anxiety. Luckily enough, he managed to stutter out his name. Izuku Midoriya. Star lives with me. Her eyes widened in realization. Oh, you're that Deku boy Star always mentions in her calls. Izuku nodded. Despite Star and him being friends for over 10 months, he had never actually met her parents formally. He chuckled some to himself. Any time was good, he supposed. Yes, milady. The green-haired teen had watched a few movies set in medieval times, so he had an idea that royalty needed to be treated with the utmost amount of respect. He even gave a short bow, although that was normal for him. Moon chuckled. She was right. You are quite calm and collected. Izuku gave the queen a perplexed look. Star said that? The queen shook her head. No, I believe her exact words were, he's a bit of a stick in the mud, but he can get really fired up and is cute too. Izuku blushed. That did sound like Star. He looked up in confusion. Wait, did you say she thought I would see you? He was cut off when one of the guards came bursting through the doors. My queen, we have a serious issue. She rose suddenly, a stern look on her face. What is it, lieutenant? The guard shakily rose his face mask and had a look of horror on his face. It seems we severely underestimated Star's power. Moon rose an eyebrow. What do you mean, yo? An explosion on the other side of the castle cut her off. The knight's face paled even more. That's what I mean. Queen Moon suddenly rose into the air and turned into a 6-armed butterfly thing. It surprised Izuku slightly, but it made sense. She turned to them. I'll go handle my daughter. She flew out of the window and sped to the other side of the castle. The knight turned to Izuku. I'm going to get the hell out of here, kid. I suggest you do the same. Izuku pondered but shook his head. I'm going to go help Star. The guard shrugged. Hey, your funeral kid. Izuku ignored the guard and ran in the direction that Moon flew to. As he approached the area that Star was in, he began to notice large masses of purple gunk. He curiously touched it, and it stuck to his hand. It began to spread, and he hurriedly shook it off his hand before it could travel too far. Hey, kid. He spun around and noticed a different guard trapped in the purple gunk. He rushed forward and looked for a way to save him. The guard shook his head. Don't try it, kid. You need to get out of here. It's not safe for us guys. The princess is apparently more stressed about her love life than we initially anticipated. Izuku frowned. Started this? The guard grunted. Yeah, you ain't never heard of Muberty before, kid. The green-haired teen shook his head. Not much, no. I'm from Earth. The guard's eyes widened. You wouldn't happen to be Deku, would you? The boy nodded. Yeah, it's a nickname. The guard's face drained. You need to go now, kid. You can't face the princess. Not right now. It's a death wish. Izuku frowned. That's pretty much what the other guard said. What's the big deal? The guard sighed. Okay, look, kid. So Muberty goes like this. Moon grunted from the strain that it took to keep her daughter in check. Said daughter writhed under her mother's grip as she tried to drag her into the safe room. Star moaned loudly. Boys. The queen continued to drag the princess. However, she had a pretty strong grip on the side of the wall. Moon groaned. We need to have a talk about her love life after this. Suddenly, Star froze immediately. For a second, Moon had thought that she had finished the transitional period, but when she heard a voice from down the hall, her pupils shrunk. Star. Izuku Midoriya to the rescue. Star desperately clawed towards the testosterone-full creature, while Moon desperately tried to hold her back. Izuku, you need to get away from Star immediately. The boy froze and looked to Moon. The guard said that she could only come out of this phase if she found a boy. I want to help. The queen stumbled a bit, and Star lurched forward. Izuku stood his ground, looking worriedly at his friend. Star. Moon was using all of her strength to keep her daughter at bay. What did she get so strong? Izuku looked to her. I'll see you later, queen. She was about to question what he said when he grabbed Star's hand. The butterfly princess wrenched herself from her grip and grabbed Izuku in a tight hug, flying out of the window and straight into the sky. Moon sighed. What had that guard told him? Earlier. You gotta go. If she doesn't find a boy soon, she'll be stuck like that. Go be a hero, kid, and save her. Izuku nodded, a determined look on his face. Now, Izuku watched carefully, admiring the beauty of the Munin land and sky. Star's flight had leveled out significantly, and she had slowed considerably. Izuku was still blushing heavily, being this close to his CR best friend, as well as her being a girl. He felt Star's grip loosen some, and saw that her arms were shrinking back to her body. Once she had reverted back to normal, she smiled warmly at him, and passed out. They began free, falling in the air, and Izuku grabbed Star tightly. He frowned at the rapidly approaching ground. He groaned. Where's Uraraka when you need her? He suddenly had an idea. Positioning a flick in the direction of the ground, he let loose a terrifying burst of wind, and he felt his finger break from the pressure. He grunted, and then slowly fell to the ground thanks to being carried by the wind. He set Star on the ground, and she slowly began to walk out. She sat up and put a hand to her head. Ugh, what happened? Izuku sighed. The guards underestimated you. She frowned and then groaned. Everyone is doing that, geez. The green-haired teen chuckled, and then noticed something on her back. Star? What's that? She curiously glanced behind her, and her eyes shone. I got my wings. Izuku looked at them in interest. He gave a little poke, and Star giggled. Sorry, it's ticklish. The green-haired teen pulled out his notebook and began adding to Star's file. Wings, huh? I wonder if they can fly. They seem kind of small. Compared to the rest of her body, they are definitely small. Are they sensory? Do they give any extra abilities? I wonder if. Star cut him off by grabbing him and jumping off a chair, momentarily floating in mid-air before crashing. Izuku groaned before laughing. Well, I guess they're just for aesthetic then. The two shared a laugh, before realizing that Star was laying on top of the young inheritor. They shared a strong blush and quickly jumped up. Star fiddled with her hair, and Izuku worriedly looked at his broken finger. Suddenly, a voice called out, Star! The two looked up, the blush disappearing, and watched as Queen Moon ran towards them. She sighed when she saw that the two were relatively unhurt. Well, thank goodness. She then turned onto the young man. What you did today was very reckless. We had things under control, and Star would have been just fine if you hadn't have came. Izuku blushed and shrunk into himself. Queen Moon continued. However, I do know that you are ignorant to our ways. So today, I give you a pass. What I don't want to know is what guard told you to come here. Meanwhile, Glossieric chuckled and lifted off the guard helmet. He gently floated out of the armor and grinned. Well, I suppose my work here is done. The little blue man then created a portal and gently floated through it. Back to the others. Moon shook her head. But that isn't important right now. Star. The girl straightened up and looked to her mom, a worried look on her face. Please don't make me go to St. Olga's. Moon chuckled. Oh, heavens no. That place is terrible. However, I would like to know how exactly you came into possession of those dimensional scissors. Star grinned nervously. Ponyhead gave them to me. Izuku remembered early into their training when the disembodied head had shown up out of nowhere and gave Star the scissors. It was a strange afternoon, to say the least. Queen Moon sighed. Of course she did. Star held them out. Do you want them? The queen shook her head. No, keep them. Who knows, you may need them someday. She then turned to Izuku. Make sure she doesn't get into any trouble. You seem like the responsible type. Izuku blushed and nodded. Yes, ma'am. Queen Moon dusted off her dress. Very well then. You two may go. Star, remember to call me at the end of the week to update me on your progress. Star grinned. Okay, Mom. Come on, Deku. She grabbed the young boy and yanked him through a portal she had cut with a short yelp. Moon sighed. Perhaps the love life talk could wait. Star and Izuku landed back in the kitchen of Izuku's apartment. His mother looked up to them in surprise. Oh, hey, you two. You're just in time for dinner. I made katsudan. The two cheered and quickly prepared to eat. Later that night, Buff Frog sat in the trees near the apartment in the cover of darkness. He pressed the communication device on his wrist. Master Toffee. The plan will soon be ready to put into action. A low hum sounded from the other end. Good. When Shigaraki launches his attack on that hero school, I want you to capture the boy. We'll lure the princess directly to our castle, and then Phase 2 can start. The frog nodded. Of course, master. The communicator buzzed out, and Buff Frog watched quietly as Star and Izuku sat in the young girl's room, talking to someone on her big mirror. In Star's room. Hey girl. Ponyhead quickly shoosh at her friend. Hey B-Fly, keep it down. I can't show too much individuality. I'll get put in the pit. Izuku rose an eyebrow. The pit? Ponyhead nodded. That's right, Freckles. They've got this pit where they brainwash the personality out of you, and it is just the worst. I mean, how can you even do that to someone, especially someone as amazing as me? Luckily, I haven't gone yet, but one more little outburst, and I'll be gone. Star gasped. That's horrible. How am I supposed to give you this awesome cake I made if you can't even enjoy it? She held up a decorated cake that admittedly looked edible, and Ponyhead looked at it hungrily. Oh girl, that looks, I mean. A princess doesn't indulge herself in such trivial pursuits. Star looked at her friend worriedly, who was wearily watching the robot guards. She then turned around. That cake looks seriously good. Star grinned. It's for your birthday. I'm going to try and sneak it in. Tears welled up in Ponyhead's eyes. Oh, B-Fly, you are seriously the best friend a girl could ask for. She suddenly flinched when the door slammed open and the guards grabbed her. Star gasped in shock. No, you won't take me alive. Star. The mirror cut out, and Star turned to Izuku. We got to save her. When the two teens portaled to the area outside of St. Olga's Reform School for Wayward Princesses, Izuku had to admit that Star definitely did the place justice when she described it. A huge fence surrounded the foreboding castle, and paired with the dark clouds and sense of dread filling the air, Izuku felt like he was in a villain's lair. He turned to Star. I see what you mean when you talk about this place. She nodded. It's terrible. They brainwash princesses into perfect little slaves. No individuality. And they're going to do it to Ponyhead. She took a step forward, but Izuku held a hand out. Wait, we need to be sneaky. Can you create some disguises with your wand? Star nodded. Yeah, hold on. She zapped herself with a bright light, and when it faded, she was dressed in an outfit that reminded Izuku of a punk girl, fit with spikes and skulls. She then grinned and zapped him as well. However, instead of being in a punk outfit, he was in a frilly green dress, and his hair was done up like a girl's. He blushed a bright red. A Star? How about you dress me like one of the guards? She giggled. I don't know. I think you look pretty cute. Princess Deku. Izuku blushed even harder and covered his face in embarrassment. This is the most embarrassing moment of my life. Star laughed and grabbed his arm, pulling him towards the school. They jumped in a line of girls, all of which looked scared and depressed. Izuku frowned at the sight, feeling bad for all the princesses that were here. If what Star said was true, he was interrupted from his thoughts when the guard asked his name. Name? Izuku frowned and turned to Star, who simply winked. He sighed. Princess Deku. The guard seemingly accepted the answer and pinned it down. Right this way, princess. The green-haired teen blushed heavily. At least no one here knew him. The guard led him to a room of princesses, all repeating the same thing. A princess is kind. A princess always keeps her manners about her. A princess never uncrosses her legs. A princess never speaks to someone in an improper manner. Izuku gazed at the projector screen that was in front of him with confusion and interest. All the girls kept a monotone voice, and soon, Star was by his side. She looked around, clearly shaken up. This is terrible. They're like a bunch of robots. But we can't stay here. We have to find Ponyhead. When she grabbed him again, Izuku felt like there was a clear theme happening here. The two slinked around the campus, avoiding the watchful eyes of the robot guards. Soon, they came upon a room that was labeled Rehabilitation Room. It was on the other end of a large room with a bunch of bored-looking princesses, all practicing etiquette. The Rehabilitation Room was guarded by two guards, and the large room was crawling with them. Star frowned. That must be where they're keeping Ponyhead. But what are we going to do about the guards? Izuku tapped his chin, a habit he had developed while he thought. He stopped, and his eyes lit up, signifying that he had an idea. He turned to Star. I have a plan. I'll create a distraction, and while the guards are worried about me, you sneak in there and steal Ponyhead. Star grinned. Sounds awesome. What are you going to do? Izuku looked into the room, with a determined look on his face. He let one for all course through his legs, and he blasted into the room at high speeds, taking out a couple of guards in the action. He stood atop the broken robots and held his hand up. You are safe, for I am here. Star put her hand over her face. Of course he had to reference All Might. Izuku grinned. Take back your free will. The guards began to surround the girls, but they all began to retaliate, and before long, the entire room was littered with robotic parts and grinning princesses. Izuku grinned back, his dress ripped to shreds, showing his torso, as well as the jogging pants he had on under it. Let's get the rest of them. They all cheered, and a few of them were staring at his abs, as they all rushed out of the room. Star sneakily opened the door to the rehabilitation room, and found Ponyhead there, laying on a chair, unconscious. She grabbed her and gently shook her awake. The floating head groggily opened her eyes and looked to her friend. Star? Star grinned and hugged her friend. They haven't got you yet. Oh, good. Ponyhead grinned as well. Ah, girl, you came to save me. Come on, let's blow this joint. The blonde princess held her hand up. Hold on, we have to get Deku. Ponyhead rose an eyebrow. The Earth Kid is here. What is he doing? Star grinned. Well, right now he's leading a revolution. A voice sounded out behind them. A revolution? Huh? They both spun around, seeing an old woman standing behind them, a smug look on her face. Izuku had an army of angry teenage princesses behind him, all of which brutally destroying robots. He turned to the closest princess, a blonde one with 4 arms. Hey, can you handle this? There's someone I need to get. She nodded, and Izuku jumped away using one for all. Once he was away from the crowd, he winced. There were bruises covering his legs, and his arm was probably fractured. He made his way back to where the rehabilitation room was and gently peeked inside. A staircase led down deeper into the school. Steeling himself, he went down with a determined look. It was very dark, and he was having trouble seeing, but he could hear voices at the end of the hall. He made his way there, and saw an old woman grinning maliciously as she watched Star and Ponyhead be brainwashed by the rehabilitation tape. Izuku noticed that they were all hooked up to a machine, and the old woman would glow periodically, while Star and Ponyhead would look a little more tired. Izuku stepped forward. Hey! She spun around, and then gave him a disgusted look. Who are you? You're clearly a princess, and a very dirty and inappropriate one at that. Izuku groaned at the princess thing. He really hoped that this wouldn't be a continuous thing. He frowned. I'm gonna need you to give me my friends back now. The old woman snorted. Oh, I'll give them back, and they'll be the most well-behaved princesses I've ever turned out of this school. She unlatched the 2, and they rose, opening their shinging eyes. They gave Izuku dainty smiles. Hello, I am Princess Star Butterfly. Hello, I am Princess Floating Ponyhead. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise. They'd already been brainwashed. He growled and sprinted forward. He crushed the machine that the old woman was using, and she gasped. That's no way for a princess to behave. You must be rehabilitated. Girls, restrain this heathen. The 2 princesses that had previously been staring into space with happy smiles suddenly turned venomous and circled Izuku. As you command, Ms. Heinous. Pony came first, and Izuku easily knocked her away. Star was much faster and hit a lot harder, so it was more difficult. He blocked one of her punches with his arm and winced. It was definitely broken. He'd have to see Recovery Girl again. She was really getting tired of him always being there. Soon, there was an opening in Star's form and landed a solid blow. She flew backwards, slamming into the wall. She was disorientated and stood back up. Ugh, what happened? Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. You were brainwashed. So was Ponyhead, but she's unconscious right now. Realization struck Star, and she turned around, looking at the room. Heinous. She's been sucking the life force out of princesses to stay young. Where did she go? The green-haired teen looked around, seeing that Heinous had taken her leave, most likely while he was distracted during his altercation with Star. He frowned. We gotta find her. Star nodded, and they picked up Ponyhead, making their way to the front gates. Heinous saw the three teens behind her, and she looked over to her henchman. Step on a Gemini. The hunchback creature hit the gas. As you wish. Milady. The car spun out of the front gate and floated into the air. Heinous leaned out of the window, looking at the two with a smug face. Star frowned. Deku, throw me. He turned to her, looking at her with confusion. Wah. She hopped in his arms. Throw. He sputtered for a minute before regaining his composure and throwing her at Heinous. Star drew her wand and aimed at the headmistress. She launched a wave of magic, but the car swerved out of the way and began to ascend faster, soon disappearing from their sight. Star descended to the ground, and Izuku hopped forward and caught her. She smiled to him. Thanks. Izuku grinned. You're welcome. They stood there for a moment, the green-haired teen holding the princess in a bridal carry, before he gently set her down, both of them carrying faint blushes. Star cleared her throat. So, what now? Izuku frowned, his face growing serious. We should probably tell your mom about this. I don't think that a crazy old lady with the technology to suck souls out of young girls to preserve her youth on the run is something that'll work itself out. Star put her hand to her chin, copying Izuku's mannerisms when he was thinking hard. Perhaps. Let's go back to your apartment, and we'll call my mom there. A groan sounded out from behind them. Did anyone catch the number of that bus? The two teens turned around, seeing that Ponyhead had finally awoken from being knocked unconscious. She looked at them. What happened? Star frowned. Heinous brainwashes us, so she could steal our youth. She escaped before we could get her, though. Ponyhead's eyes widened. Do you know what that means? Izuku nodded. There's a villain loose and possibly wreaking havoc throughout the dimensions. The floating head shook her. Head? No. It means that there's no adults at the school, which also means it's time to party. Ponyhead shot off to the school, leaving Izuku and Star in the dust. Izuku blinked slowly. Oh. Star looked over to him and shrugged. I'm all for a party. Izuku shook his head. We have to talk to your mom first. Plus, we have school tomorrow morning. Today's a Sunday. Star groaned. Ugh, school. The green-haired teen rose an eyebrow. I thought you liked UA? She nodded. I do, but not when it's cutting into my precious party time. Izuku laughed, and Star pouted at him before caving in a laughing as well. She pulled out the scissors. Okay, we can go. Besides, who knows when that place will come under new management. Izuku chuckled. Maybe one of the previous students can take over and turn the place into a school that teaches you to party. In St. Olga's, a four-armed princess stared at her glass of juice. Her eyes narrowed. I feel like my plan just got foreshadowed. Weird. Star laughed and cut the portal. The two walked through and over to Star's mirror. They quickly adopted a serious expression. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Call Mom. A robotic voice sounded out from the large mirror. Calling Mom. Soon. Queen Moon picked up, a surprised look on her face. Oh, hello, Star. Izuku. Izuku waved meekly, and Star returned the hello. Queen Moon continued. What is it, dear? Star frowned, Izuku joining her. Mom, we went to St. Olga's to help Ponyhead. We got there, and it turns out that Ms. Heinous has been absorbing the life essence from princesses in order to preserve her youth. She brainwashes them to act perfectly as well. Queen Moon seemed skeptical. Now, Star, St. Olga's is a very prestigious academy. I'm sure Izuku spoke up. She's telling the truth. Queen Moon quickly shut her mouth, clearly shocked. Izuku immediately cowered a little and blushed. I was there, and I saw everything. He almost mentioned the small revolution he led, but he decided to leave that one out. Queen Moon rose an eyebrow, and Izuku steeled himself. She's on the loose, and both Star and I believe that she is dangerous to be left alone. The responsible thing to do was contact you about it. Star nodded, and Queen Moon seemed taken aback, before grinning and shaking her head. Very well then. I'll have the magical High Commission look into it. Star smiled. Thanks, Mom. The Queen chuckled. You're welcome, dear. Remember to give me your weekly report Friday. She nodded, and the transmission was cut off. Star sighed and collapsed on her bed. Izuku smiled. Well, I think today has been pretty productive. I'm going to sleep, so I can be prepared for class in the morning. Good night, Star. The princess mumbled out a quick good night, and Izuku left the room. Star yawned and decided to take Izuku's advice and get some sleep. At the very least, she could dream about partying, right? In a bar somewhere. Toffee leaned against the edge of the bar, sniffing a glass of an earth beverage called whiskey. It was decent, with a bit of a burn. He set the glass down and turned to the person he was here to talk to. Tamura Shigaraki, it's good to see you. The shaggy man nodded. Likewise. I believe you're here to talk about the plan. Are you not? Toffee nodded. Straight to business. We have a lot in common. Yes, I have come to discuss the plan. I do not think attacking UA will be enough. Shigaraki rose an eyebrow. Where are you getting at? The lizard man sat down in front of Tamura. What I mean is, I'd like to kidnap a student. One Izuku Midoriya, to be exact. I believe that this will further both of our agendas. You get your publicity and a good blow to UA. I get the princess to come to negotiate with me, assuming she is to save her friend, which is the most likely scenario. It's a win-win. Shigaraki grinned eerily. I like the way you think, Toffee. Level 1 begins now. Toffee smirked, and Shigaraki's grin widened. Yes, indeed their plan was foolproof. Izuku was a morning person. During his 10 months of training with All Might, he'd wake up at 4:30 sharp every morning in order to get a start on the day. Star, on the other hand, was not a morning person. Once she had started living with the Midoriyas and begun to wake up early to train with Izuku, she had been introduced to the joy of coffee. Immediately, she was smitten with the earth beverage and would often find herself drinking it even if it wasn't morning time. So when she dragged Izuku to a new coffee shop that had opened up nearby, and the both of them had showed up late to class, Aizawa had given the both of them a hard stare. Izuku blushed and rubbed the back of his neck, and Star didn't even notice as she drank her coffee, slightly bouncing. Midoriya, butterfly, why are you late? Izuku blushed and stumbled over his words. Oh, well, we want to get coffee at this new place that opened up nearby, and it's really good. The line was kind of long, though. Do you want some? Aizawa gave her a curious glance. What is it? Star grinned. Black with like 7 scoops of sugar. The scraggly man's lips tinged up for a moment. Someone with taste. He mumbled to himself. Take your seats. I'll excuse you this time. Don't let it happen again. Izuku was at a loss and simply watched in confusion as Star happily bounced over to her seat and grinned happily. Awaha. Aizawa didn't even glance at him. Take your seat, Midoriya, before I write you up for being tardy. Izuku let out a quick yes, sir, and took his seat next to Star. The rest of the day went by as normal, Star doodling on her paper, and Izuku faithfully taking notes. By the time lunch rolled around, Star had already crashed, the caffeine in the coffee having wore off. She groaned. So, tired, and bored. They sat at a table with Mina, Achiko, and Tenya. The pink-skinned girl groaned in a similar fashion. It's the second week of school. Why are they so hard already? Achiko giggled a little, and Tenya's glasses shone. Studies are very important. A true hero is sound in both mind and body. The two happy-go-lucky girls groaned again, and Star grabbed Izuku's shoulder, making the boy drop his chopsticks full of meat in the process. He frowned. But I've got Deku to help me. I don't need boring Mr. Aizawa. Izuku picked up his chopsticks. Don't drag me into this. You do need to focus more on your studies. Star put a hand to her chest, and a tear fell from her eye. So cruel. The bell rung, and the students all gathered their things and went to class. Class 1A situated themselves and patiently awaited for their teacher to enter. However, when the door was slammed open and a familiar blonde hero with bulging muscles slid into the room, the class went nuts. All Might. The man laughed heartily. One of the many virtues of a hero, the ability to make a dramatic entrance. This is your first lesson. The class watched in amazement as the hero strode to the front desk and struck a heroic pose. Izuku didn't care that he had been personally trained by this man or that he had inherited his power. Every time he did something, it was the coolest thing Izuku had laid his eyes on. All Might scanned his eyes over the class, winking at both Star and Izuku when he saw them. Izuku's grin was wide, and Star happily waved to him. He cleared his throat and looked forward. Now today, students, we will be doing some combat training. Excited murmur sounded throughout the class, and All Might held his hand up. Furthermore, I'm sure all of you remember submitting your designs for hero costumes with your applications. Well, they've just arrived at the school, and you'll be testing them out in today's training. If the class was excited before, they were ballistic now. All Might pressed a button on a little remote, and several compartments shot out of the wall. Settle down now. Your costumes are in here. Please take them and get changed. Meet me in the practical area afterwards. You are dismissed. The students shot up and went over to the costumes, excitedly pulling them out of the boxes and heading to the locker rooms. Izuku pulled out his, excitedly feeling the tough leather of his own costume, dyed green per his design. He looked over to Star, who excitedly pulled out a little box and shoved it onto the end of her wand. Izuku gave her a curious look. What's that? She turns to him and grins. It's a magic amplifier. I got it from the black market. I'll at Quest Buy. Izuku nodded. That's pretty handy. Just try not to go overboard, yeah? Star waved him off. No promises. The green-haired teen sighed and made his way to the locker room and put his costume on. All Might waited patiently in the practical area, and soon enough, 20 heroes in training made their way outside. His eyes unconsciously drifted over to Izuku and Star, who was bouncing excitedly beside her green friend. They all stopped in front of him, and he put his hands on his sides. You will each draw a number, labeled with either blue or red. There are 4 of each number, 2 of which that share color. Red pairs will be the villains, who guard a large bomb. The blue pairs will be the heroes, who either capture both villains or take control and defuse the bomb. Draw. Each student grabbed a slip and looked for their partner. Izuku turned to Star and noticed that they had the same slip. He sighed in relief. He could make sure she didn't do anything too crazy if he was paired with her. He looked around and saw that everyone was getting their teams. Katsuki glowered at Achiko, who worriedly looked between him and Izuku. Mina was excitedly talking to Tenya, and the blue-haired boy was nodding along, his hand to his chin in thought. Perhaps they were talking battle strategy? Once the lots had been chosen, All Might stood at the front and announced the combating teams. The first team was Team Midoriya Butterfly versus Team Bakugo Yururika. Izuku's stomach lurched at the thought of going up against his former friend. Katsuki turned to the green-haired boy and grinned savagely. His expression was so clear that Izuku could nearly hear what he was thinking. Get ready to die, Deku monster. The villains were sent to the building where they would fight early, giving them enough time to plan, and the heroes enough time to strategize. Izuku turned to Star, who was bouncing excitedly and fiddling with her wand. I have a plan. She looked at him. Really? I was just going to bust in their guns blaring. What's your plan, though? The green-haired teen opened up his notebook and was reviewing some notes on Katsuki. Kachin will most likely hunt me down specifically in order to beat me up. If we can lure him far enough away from the bomb, I can distract him while you take care of the bomb. Star nodded along to the plan. So you're going to fight Mr. Bang Bang? Izuku bit back a laugh and nodded. Yes. The blonde grinned. Kick his butt for me. I'll try. He grinned shakily. This could either go really bad for him or really bad for Katsuki, and he didn't really want to deal with either. The timer for preparation went out, and the two turned on their Bluetooth communicators. The building was quiet, and the two began to walk the corridors. Izuku looked around, his voice low. They haven't shown yet. The bomb must be higher up. Let's keep. A huge explosion interrupted the two of them, and they moved out of the way at the last minute. Katsuki grinned from the other side of the hall. There you are, Deku. Fish Beach, too. Today's just my day, huh? Izuku frowned and got into a fighting position. Star, go. I'll keep him distracted. Star sprinted in the other direction, and Katsuki scoffed. You think you can handle me on your own, Deku? What a quirkless idiot. He shot forward, and Izuku immediately recognized his pattern. A signature right hook starting every single one of his fights. So Izuku responded like he has wanted to for the past 10 years. He grabbed Katsuki's arm and swung him over his shoulder, using his momentum to slam him into the floor. The breath was knocked out of him, and Izuku bounced back like the rabbit he was dressed as. Katsuki regained his bearings, and his face had shifted from being just savage to looking beyond livid. Eyes wild, and with veins popping from his forehead, Katsuki let out feral cry. "You die today, DKU, you monster." Izuku quickly sprinted in the opposite direction as Star, in order to lead him away from them. Izuku pressed his communicator. "Quick, get to the bomb." Izuku ran as hard as he could, twisting through the narrow corridors, with Katsuki hot on his tail. "Stop running from me, and let me blow your head off your shoulders." Izuku didn't slow and didn't say a word, effectively pissing Katsuki off even more. "Don't ignore me, DKU." The green-haired teen's plan was going perfectly to work. As long as he could keep Katsuki angry and after him, Star could go up to the bomb and secure it. Izuku quickly turned a corridor and pressed himself against the wall. Katsuki blasted past him, looking around angrily as he continued to yell for the young inheritor. His communicator beeped, and he pressed the button, talking low. "What is it?" Star frowned on the other end. "I can't find the bomb." Izuku frowned. "We searched all the bottom floors. It has to be on the top floor." The blonde princess made an affirmative noise. "Yeah, and I've looked every woe." The communicator buzzed softly, and Star let out a yell. The green-haired teen worriedly pressed the Bluetooth button. "Star? Star, you okay?" "There you are, you quirkless one. I'm going to thrash you out of this school and into the dirt where you belong, you green-haired monster." Izuku jumped up in surprise, and he dropped his communicator. Katsuki slammed his foot down, crushing it, and grinned. "I can finally finish what I started." Star frowned as she floated gently through the air, a ribbon tied around her body. Achiko sat beside her on the floating bomb. The blonde princess spun around, now facing the gravity girl. "So, Mr. Splody McBangbang came up with this idea?" She nodded. "Yeah, he figured that it would be easier to split the two of you apart, because you work together well. He also wanted to go after Deku on his own." Star seemed impressed. That's pretty much the same thing Izuku thought of. He figured Katsuki would go after him. Smarter than he looks. Achiko chuckled. He was the top student in the entrance exam. She nodded. "Yeah, well, he didn't count on one thing." Achiko rose an eyebrow and looked over to Star. "What?" Star grinned widely and flashed her wand. "Magic." Her wand began to glow. "Super rope begone." The binds evaporated, and Star floated in the air, holding her wand confidently. Achiko suddenly looked worried. "Narwhal blast." Several large fish shot out of the wand, and Achiko jumped up, quickly tapping them as they came to her, and activating her quirk. The narwhals harmlessly floated away, and Achiko began to pant slightly, feeling her stomach twirl. She grit her teeth. She couldn't keep this up much longer. She released her quirk, and everyone gently floated to the ground. Star grinned and continued to fire spells. Achiko was avoiding the best she could, but every time she used her quirk, she got a little more nauseous. Suddenly, the ground began to shake violently, and the floor began to crumble. Star yelped, and Achiko stumbled. The bomb began to fall through the floor, but Star brought up her wand. Big safety net. A huge net shot out and enveloped Achiko and the bomb, securing them with cords that attached to the stable pillars. The blonde princess yelled to Achiko, "Are you okay?" The gravity girl nodded. "Thanks to you." Star grinned. "We're friends for." All Might's voice came over the loudspeaker. "The hero team wins." Katsuki stood in his position, eyes wide and frozen. The explosion he just unleashed tore the entire side of the building off, and Deku had stood right in the middle of it and let his attack blast through the top of the building. His arm was bent at an odd angle, obviously broken, and he was covered in third-degree burns, the kind that would leave permanent scars. Katsuki felt a little sick to his stomach as he watched him fall to the ground, finally falling unconscious due to his wounds. He grit his teeth. Of course, that quirkless idiot wouldn't try to move or attack back. He probably planned this stunt from the beginning. The volatile teen clenched his fist and yelled, "F it." Most people would see it as anger for losing. But for Katsuki, it was something completely different, something he'd never thought he'd feel for that green-haired idiot in his life. It was small, but it was there, and Katsuki hated it already. He respected the quirkless idiot. When everyone exited the building, Star went straight to the paramedics. Izuku was being carried out on a stretcher, making her stomach twist when she saw the state her best friend was in. She turned and sent a glare towards Katsuki, who seemed to be lost in thought. She walked over to All Might. "I'm going with Izuku." Before the number one hero could respond, the girl was gone with a wind of sugar cookies and soot. All Might sighed and turned to the students he still had. So he began. "Anyone know what they all did wrong?" Izuku awoke to the distant sound of commotion. He arose from his infirmary bed, still a little sore and tired, and looked out the window. When he saw a group of reporters, his mind went into overdrive. How did they get here? UA's security system is supposed to be impenetrable. They were trying to ask the pro-heroes questions, but the heroes seemed to be more intent on pushing them off of school grounds. A loud snore from next to him made him jump in surprise. He looked over and saw Star leaned up in a chair, snoring away. Izuku smiled softly. She was really cute while she slept. Wait, WH. Izuku shook his head. No, he totally thought that. She was cute while she slept. That's not weird, right? Calling his best friend cute? She does it to him all the time, so... Besides, it's not like he likes her, right? The woman frowned and threw the files on the top of the bar. This is UA's schedule for the rest of the year. We managed to get in undetected, and one of the guys was able to get the files. The reporter lady frowned expectantly as Toffee looked at the folder. He nodded, his indifferent facial expression never changing. He held a bag out for her, and she eagerly took it. She looked up and grinned. "Pleasure doing business with you." Toffee smirked and opened the file. "Kirojiri, tell Tamura that we make our attack at the end of the week." He circled the day, labeled Hero Course Field Trip, USJ, and grinned. And so it begins. So, this was the end of part 1 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.